Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Mr. Monroe by Raylin Marks, narrated by Stephanie Rose and Jeremy York. Introduction. Nat. I sat across the table from Bree, my happily married best friend, and smirked. I watched as she pushed a caramelized carrot around her plate, her mind far from the dinner I'd dragged her to with a colleague from my real estate firm. Polly had invited me to talk shop, I was sure, so I asked Bree to come and serve as a buffer, which she was happy to oblige. I wasn't the type to suffer through a work dinner on a Friday night. No, thank you. I feel sorry for you, I nearly whispered with a smile. Her head snapped up, and then she glanced over to Polly, who was caught up in a conversation with a friend who'd stopped by our table 5 minutes ago. The two were going on about a missed dinner date, or some such nonsense. And since I'd never met this Diane character before, I couldn't care less. I was getting mildly impatient, since we'd all faked our way through the meal, Polly acting as if she enjoyed working in the same real estate firm as me, even though I was her most formidable competitor. She'd been dying to take my #1 spot for years, but I was far too good at my job to let that happen. I was the best agent around, and everyone in Southern California knew it. That wasn't going to change now or ever, especially not at the hands of Polly fucking Coker. I'd been invited to this dinner for a reason, however, and my patience was growing thin while I waited to find out why. My guess was that this was about the Kirby deal, but I wasn't going to find that out if goddamn Diane didn't stop bitching about her missed connection. Don't worry, you haven't missed anything interesting, and you've not been caught sulking by anyone but me. I smirked and winked knowingly at Bree. I guess I'm just not in the mood to be out on a Friday night after all, you know? Bree answered, trying not to show her irritation. Oh, do I ever know these things with you, Bree Grayson, I said, leaning over the table toward her. That's why I feel sorry for you. I will never, mark my words, never find myself in your pathetic situation. Pathetic situation? Polly said, bringing her attention back to us now that her friend was gone. Oh dear. She covered her heart while I narrowed my eyes at her fake dramatics. Don't tell me it's about you and Alex. She stopped herself, and I wanted to roll my eyes at her inference. This woman was among many on the long list of women who'd loved for Bree and Alex's marriage to fail, so that the handsome billionaire would be back on the market again. Interesting, I said, eyeing the woman, sipping my cocktail. You act like you almost want this to be about her and Alex, with the way you jump to that conclusion. Nat, I'm not trying to act like I know what Alex would have done to cause Bree to have difficulty being out tonight, Polly offered. Bree went to respond, but I reached across the table, patted her hand, and gave my girl a knowing smile, pleading with her to go along with this for me. Polly was not only a snake in business, but whenever it came to money, she would sink her venomous fangs into you and try to destroy you from the inside out. I know you're not trying to act like you know, darling, I simply stated. But I would be ashamed if I were the one acting like I didn't know what you were getting at. I suppose you are right, though. Alex is the reason why Bree is sulking tonight, completely disenchanted with us and our dinner. What's going on? Polly urged, brushing her copper hair over her shoulder and leaning forward to hear better. It's embarrassing, really. Bree played along, knowing Polly couldn't care less about her problems. Women like Polly only cared about whether Alex Grayson was going back on the auction block. I wouldn't have been surprised if that was why I'd been invited to dinner, and not because of the Kirby deal. But I think this was about Polly wanting to keep friends close and enemies closer. She and I were in a bidding war to land a massive commission for a developer. Bree and Alex's company was in the mix, too. And with their world-renowned architecture firm in my back pocket, Polly knew my chances of landing this deal were almost unbeatable. "Is that Alex?" Polly questioned after Bree was interrupted by a text. Could anyone possibly be so desperate? The woman had to have been drunk. "Sorry, and no, it wasn't Alex," Bree answered. Her eyes told me she was thinking the same thing I was, that this woman was practically begging for Alex and Bree to split. So pathetic. "This is all kind of embarrassing," she said, mainly to me now. "I would be embarrassed," I said, sipping my appletini. "It's just not right. Thus, no one will ever catch me in your shoes. I refuse to let marriage ruin one single night of my life. I can't even imagine what you go through, honey." "That's you, though, Nat." Polly paused, and a tight-lipped smirk kissed the corner of her mouth as she looked at Bree and sighed. "And poor Brienne. You, dear, are just a hopeless romantic, and these things happen to people like you. Sometimes it's too good to be true." She sat back in her chair smugly. "Thank God you decided to come out tonight. I can't imagine you sitting at home alone like this." "You're so right," Bree responded, nodding her head as if she'd been imparted with wisdom. "I can't imagine myself at home alone either." "Especially in that 20,000 square foot home?" I said, as if the size of the house offended me. But in reality, it impressed me beyond imagination. "Well, if it helps, I'm sort of going through the same thing." Polly sighed, and now my attention was stolen, and my curiosity piqued. "Well, it's just a touch different." "You?" I hung on to the word, not meaning to sound too dramatic, but I failed at covering my surprise. "You're in a relationship that has lasted for more than one night?" "You're one to talk, Nat," she answered dryly. "I am one to talk. And hey, I'm not ashamed that the idea of having one man in my life for an extended amount of time gives me panic attacks. It's who I am. You, however, are not me." My admittedly dysfunctional view of relationships was not news here. The interesting subject matter was that Polly had admitted to being in a relationship and feeling connected to Bree's fake heartache. "What's going on, Polly?" Bree asked. Polly exhaled. "Mr. Kirby. You know, the developer." "Mr. Kirby? You mean Dick?" I said, a little too high-pitched and excited at this conversation turn. "His name is Richard," Polly snapped at me. "I know him as Dick, and he knows exactly why," I said in my usual sexy voice, prompting Bree to cover her laugh. "Oh?" Polly's voice cracked like ice, and the woman's darker side began to show. Alcohol was in play here, so I didn't want to burn bridges over this deal and make enemies, so I backed off a little. "You wish," Bree said, saving me before I could save myself. "True," I conceded. "I just call him Dick. But rest assured, I've never been anywhere near his." "Well," Polly's smile crept back with a vengeance. "He allowed me plenty of time near his, and if that man weren't married, I'd happily settle down with him in a snap." Bree and I nearly simultaneously choked on our cocktails at what Polly had openly confessed. "Good God," I said, unashamed of my tone. "Honey, you know the platinum rule, don't you? Everyone knows. You don't fuck with the married ones." My tone wasn't judgmental, condescending, or meant to be harsh. On the contrary, it was a very justified warning, reminding Polly of the unwanted karma attached to moving into another woman's domain. Not to mention the misery of being with an indecisive fucker. Being single was supposed to be fun, not miserable. "Listen," Polly said, her sudden humility somewhat disturbing me. "I know that, I just see it as more of one woman's trash is another woman's treasure situation. What the fuck does that mean? I answered. It's a term some people say for getting rid of their junk in yard sales. She answered. Yeah, I know that. You can't compare a woman's marriage to a yard sale, Polly, I returned. Not only for the sake of this woman, who I'm confident has no idea her man is fucking you, but for yourself above all. Richard says they're miserable, and she hates him, she answered. He assumes she's probably cheating on him. And you saw this as your green light to fuck a married guy? I mean, I understand that there are irreparable marriages out there and a multitude of miserable couples who need to call it quits. My parents being ranked highest among them. And perhaps, in some rare cases, it takes meeting someone new to break that toxic cycle. So they take steps to dissolve the marriage. But none of that makes it a yard sale situation, sweetheart. You have no idea what kind of a situation it is, she said, growing flustered. Oh, but I do. It doesn't take a genius mind like mine to recognize that this is bad news for you. The mere idea of succumbing to a married man's charms, a man on business while the wife is in another country, makes me shudder. The words, I'm married, raise a red flag, and I don't hear anything else after that. Nothing about how sad or lonely they are or how mean their wife is. It's a load of shit they need to tell their therapist about. And last I checked, I don't have a degree in psychology. You don't have to be a bitch. It's none of your business what I do personally, Net. Yes, you're right. It is none of my business. But somehow, you made it my business since I'm trying to land a deal with this philanderer. And land this deal I will, regardless of whether he is using you as his fuck buddy while in the States. I watched tears pool in her eyes. She was already in too deep, listening to charming words from a weasel and a coward, using her as some side chick while not attempting to dissolve his so-called miserable marriage. I ordinarily wouldn't have given half a fuck about any of this, but I wanted this deal and my monumental commission. Deep down, something else drove me to be a saint for a minute. Apparently, I needed to make up for some bad behavior so as not to burn in hell. And here I was, acting like Oprah and trying to impart wisdom about not fucking around with a married man. He won't break my heart, she said after we grew quiet. I know he loves me. He said he and I met for a reason and that I was an answer to his prayers. Classic words to keep a vulnerable soul around. Of course he told you that, or you wouldn't believe his chicken shit lies, telling you he is miserable with the wife he never plans on leaving. Dear God, Bree said, and rubbed her forehead. Polly, everyone knows that married men always return to their wives. Your relationship is probably even what's making him appreciate her more. Don't do this to yourself. Bree's right, I added. Dick has a lot of wealth and power. Do you honestly think he will give up his image because he wants to settle down with some hot American real estate agent? It would expose him as the dirtbag he is. People like that don't soil their reputation with divorce. I didn't need to get started on my views of spouses doing spiteful shit like this to each other, and my prejudices of married men being predators, looking for the next piece of ass because they were too chicken shit to just end their marriages. I couldn't go too hard on Polly, though. I saw the look in her eye that said she'd already given this liar her heart, because he told her exactly what she needed to hear. It was heartless and brutal, if you asked me. But the best part was that I could be just as vicious with these cowards. These men, like my father, ruined everyone's lives they touched. And somehow, they could still look at themselves in the mirror every morning. You fell for him, didn't you? I wanted to hear it from her mouth. She shook her head. You guys don't understand. None of the men I've been with have treated me as well as he has. I love him, and I'll appreciate it if we can end this conversation here and now. You don't know who he is or anything about his feelings for me. He's not some random cheating husband. He's in love with me, even if he is stuck in that miserable marriage for now." "This is the horror of marriage," I bluntly stated, possibly a little too loud. "Whether this man truly loves you or not, if he hasn't ended things with his wife, he's not planning on doing so anytime soon. Or ever." "You don't know that," Polly returned lethally. This shit was hopeless. I was done with the conversation, but not with Dick Kirby. I guess it was easy to see that I hated married men who played like they were single just to get attention. "Fine," I said, sipping my cocktail. "Your love for this man won't stop me from landing this deal and burying him. Forgive me if I'm not so gentle with men who play games on a personal level." "Burying him?" Polly arched an eyebrow at me, warning me as she protected that cheating motherfucker. "I won't let you do that." I smiled at her. "Hold tight to his neck, honey, because you gave me all the motivation I need to use Alex and Bree to spike this bid well over what Dick wants to pay. And he will pay it, because I've never met a desperate and lonely man who would turn my sexy ass down." "So, after everything I confided in you, you're going to use it to sleep with him?" she said, more insecurely than angrily, to my surprise. "You believe you're in love with this man, who will soon leave his wife, yet there is already zero trust in him," I said. "You're a whore," she snapped. "I've been called worse, but I'm not allowing that man within inches of my body. However, a little heavy flirting will get me the deal I want and send him back to the wife he was never planning to leave in the first place. Trust me, you're in too deep already, and you'll thank me for this later. Married men never leave their wives." Bree rose with me as I grabbed my clutch in preparation to leave. "And don't call women whores. There's no shame in a woman getting around as much as she goddamn well pleases. It really is the laziest insult." I finished with a hint of pride for saving this woman a lot of grief and heartache, knowing I'd be rewarded by nailing this fucker with a hefty bid he couldn't refuse. I suddenly felt renewed and restored, knowing my time tonight was not wasted. We stood outside the restaurant, waiting for the valet to bring the car, when I heard a deep, sexy voice utter my name.
"If it isn't the elusive Natalia Hoover."
I couldn't spin around fast enough to get an eyeful of whoever wanted a piece of... fuck. Dear God. Why? Now I was face to face with him, and the glaring reminder that there were a lot more Dicks in the world beyond Dick Kirby. Spencer Monroe. I acknowledged the sexy billionaire, who was uncatchable and untouchable. Polly could have used this man to get over that married asshole, but Spence was just as toxic, in my opinion. We were in a stare-off as Bree caught up and smiled at her husband's friend and business partner. "Hey, Spence," Bree said, trying to cut through the sudden tension that crackled in the air between us. "I truly feel that if I never saw you again, it would be far too soon," I said, before he could answer Bree's cheerful greeting.
"You insult me every time you see me. This is not war, you know,"
he responded, unashamed as always and making me angry with his flirty grin. Aside from our insulting sexual experience, which I was certain I would never get over, he was devastatingly handsome. Unfortunately, and much to my dismay, the chill running down my spine confirmed what the heat between my legs was begging for. I wanted this man. Perhaps it was the alcohol that was evoking my horniness, because I usually wasn't so reactive to any man, especially Spencer Monroe.
Good evening, Brienne. How's Alex?
Spencer finally managed to return Bree's greeting. He's good. At home with the twins while I'm out. She smiled.
And from the conversation I overheard at your table, I'm assuming Polly Coker is not sleeping with your married man, then?
I rolled my eyes. Do I look like I would sit casually at a table with anyone who would dare to hurt one of my friends? I said, irritated with myself that I felt the need to respond. And when I did, my response sounded quite dumb.
You couldn't hurt a fly, Miss Hoover.
Spence taunted, while Bree checked her phone again. How would you know, Mr. Monroe? You obviously couldn't nail an orgasm with me without being distracted enough to answer your phone, so you have no idea what I am capable of. Bree dropped her phone after I said that too loud, and because I was in this stupid standoff with this dreadful asshole, I ignored that her case had popped off and gone one way, while her phone went the other. Spencer broke the stare, and in true gentleman fashion, he walked to the right and snatched up her phone while Bree fumbled for the case on the floor. My night had turned on me, and I was over this place and everyone in it. I think Nat's had one too many tonight. Bree covered for me, seeing my expression and knowing it was time to dip out of here.
Seems so,
Spencer responded, while my eyes narrowed at him. The truth was, I wished I'd had one too many tonight, so I could shrug this asshole off. Spencer Monroe had insulted me in the worst way possible, by answering his goddamn phone mid-thrust, right when I was about to climax. I couldn't think of a bigger insult from a man. Maybe I was just that simple of a woman, or maybe I wasn't. I didn't know, nor did I care. I also didn't ask for this run-in and reminder of that hopeless sexual experience again. Bree, you were missing Alex and the twins at dinner, and suddenly, all I want is to relax at your place with one of your chick flicks. I'm ready when you are.
It was lovely to see you again, Nat,
Spencer said with that sexy smile. All you want is another opportunity to prove yourself, and I will be the first to tell you that your business schemes may work on others, but they don't work on me. So, save your charms for someone else.
Lovely to see you tonight, too, Brienne. Tell Alex we can catch up when I return from business in London.
He walked over to the valet stand and handed them his ticket. God, that man irritates the shit out of me, I said, moving my shoulders as if I were shrugging off a nasty disease. I do not lie when I say I can't stand these ridiculous, unexpected run-ins with him. Oh, Nat, Bree rubbed my arm. Of all the men you've been with, you're the hardest on him. He's part of our friend group, and you'll eventually have to sit in the same room with him without sparring. No, I don't have to do anything that involves being in the same room with that man. I have boundaries. I smiled at her. Bree shook her head. Does this sudden crappy mood mean we can go home and eat ice cream? Bree, darling, whatever will I do with you and this sappy married life? I know you love it, she said. I love it because I love you and the family. But is this in my future? Absolutely not. I will not be a part of all the stresses that come with marriage. As I said, I enjoy my freedom. Then you shall die a lonely maid, she teased with her usual dramatics. Me, a maid? Never. And lonely. Do you even know who I am? We laughed, and the evening's drama-filled events slowly slipped to the back of my mind. But there was one thing that didn't, and that was ensuring I never came face to face with Spencer unexpectedly again. No man insulted me and got away with it. And they certainly never got a second chance.
Chapter 1. Spencer. I tilted my seat back and shut my eyes to enjoy my first minute of peace since I'd boarded the jet in London. I had 9 more minutes of silence to indulge in before I went back to my computer and continued going through the background checks I'd requested for the companies I'd gone on this latest trip to investigate. All in all, the week had gone as predictably well as every other trip I took to London these days. But for some reason, I was more drained than usual as I took the transatlantic flight back home on the luxurious company jet. I'd started frequenting the Beaufort bar at the Savoy back when I'd graduated from Oxford, and it had been in that very bar where Jim Mitchell had given me the job offer that had changed everything for me. I would be the first to admit that it was a change for the better, but these trips to the UK had become more draining whenever I went. If I hadn't seen her text the week before, I would have assumed that Heidi had died without letting me know and was now haunting the city where she'd grown up. Buzz, buzz, buzz. I opened one eye and glared down at the phone vibrating on the polished mahogany table where all my work was spread out in the usual "a bomb just went off" pattern that my friends always gave me shit for. I had to admit that they might have a point, but my way of working had gotten me to the top of my class at Oxford University, an honor also held by the one and only Jim Mitchell, who'd graduated 2 years ahead of me. The very same son of a bitch who was calling me now. I picked up the phone with a sigh, pinching the bridge of my nose as I sighed. This had better be an emergency. A throaty chuckle that sounded like a mix between thunder and a jungle cat rumbled down the line. "I'm sorry, have I interrupted one of your sweet naps, little Monroe?" "Actually, yes, you twat, and they're more precious than sweet. Get it straight." "Twat? Why is it that whenever you go to the UK, you come back sounding more and more like Gordon fucking Ramsay?" "First off, leave my man out of this. Ramsay comes correct, whether anyone likes it or not. Second, I have no idea where that word came from. Who knows, call it the class factor, something you've never managed to grasp, despite your massively impressive education and even more massive ego." I knew nothing I said made any sense. I needed sleep, but there was no rest for the wicked. "Ignore my rambling. I'm too exhausted for this shit." I heard Jim laugh. He knew my ass was fried. I never explained myself to anyone. I was a man who was steady on his course, and I didn't care what the next motherfucker thought of me. I handled shit and lit fucks on fire as I walked away. It's just who I was. "What's up?" I finally questioned, irritated because I had shown some weakness to Jim. "I got the files on the Leadenhouse acquisition," Jim said, his voice becoming more serious and subdued. "They came with an interesting email from Wendy herself, with some fascinating new demands for the expansion of the galleries. I just forwarded it to you." As usual, I could be dead-ass tired, but once shit started getting real, I woke the fuck up and was ready to handle it like I'd just had 20 hours of sleep. "I'm curious as to why I wasn't CC'd on that email, but fuck me, right?" I answered, opening my laptop in annoyance. As I pulled up my email, I heard a door open on the other end of the phone and a sweet little voice say, "Daddy, can we go to the movies today?" "What did Mommy say?" Jim answered the voice.
"She said to ask you. She said there's a problem at the center that she's working on, but Izzy and I want to see the new Minions movie."
"Let me finish talking to Uncle Spence, honey, because I'm having a problem with work. Do you want to call Auntie Ash? Maybe you could go with her, John, and Kaylee." Throwing Ash under the bus, huh? I'm sure she'd love to go to the movies with 4 kids, Jim, I said with a chuckle, my mind happily absorbed in this conversation.
"But we want to go with you, Daddy."
"How about this?" Jim said, ignoring me. "Uncle Spence and I will finish this phone call as fast as possible, and then we'll watch the movie and go get mac and cheese for dinner.
Okay.
You're adorable, I said as I heard the door shut.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?